All right, everybody, how we doing? We've got a special episode today of kind of a crossover for Brently Live and Unapologetics, and we have some special guests. We have from the podcast Left at the Valley. It's really, something I've never really heard of it, but I've just recently found it, and we got Helen here. How you doing, Helen?
Hello, person I don't know.
And
I
we
just got
also
absorbed in here.
and then we have I want to say the project director. Is that correct? Of recovering from religion. Uh,
Online programming director, but
online
I'll
program. I'm
take
sorry.
it. You may call me director Kara. No.
There we go. Yeah. Kara, how we doing? All
I'm
right, cool.
great. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, so we all read a really terrible book. What was the name of this piece of shit? It was something like God and
God,
the
yeah, God and the transgender debate. It's
yeah.
a debate.
I it's hard to have a debate against something that doesn't exist, but okay, well, we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it.
So initial thoughts, just any thoughts coming out, just like to summarize. Um,
Yeah, okay. I'll go first with
Okay.
kind of the reason we ended up reading this book, I think, was, Helen and I were talking about it, and it was a long story, but a family member of mine read this book and it convinced her, apparently for some reason, to stop posting transphobic memes on Facebook, which is something that I had been unable to convince her to do previously, as her child and person who was offended by said memes, person who
wow.
is non-binary, but she read this book and discovered that she should stop doing that. So I was like, wow, that's good. It's weird to me that this is going to be like an evangelical book, but okay, maybe it'll be halfway good. Maybe this person has some misunderstanding about gender, but their heart's in the right place. But that is not what I came away from reading the book with. And it's not the impression I was left with. After all, it was disappointing.
No, yeah, I can't believe that your mom got like that takeaway from it that she even was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be mean. I'm surprised that she got
Yeah. I am also surprised that someone needed to read a book to think of that.
yeah.
But,
Is this progress? Progress?
right.
It comes in all
Sure.
shapes, including backwards. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Is this
Yeah.
an example of like one step forward, 10 steps back? Like,
Seriously, yeah,
Yeah.
it was really weird too because it seemed like when the first chapter because I was listening to it. That's why I said it that
I
way
did
because
too.
otherwise it sounds weird.
we
Uh,
listened to it.
it was
We read
yeah,
technically with our
yeah, we read
ears.
it out loud into the ears anyway. But it when it came on, it was like, oh, okay, it seems good because he was like, basically saying that these are people. This isn't these aren't like evil people. They're people. We should be kind. We should show Jesus's love, all that kind of stuff. And then it just was like it was like he forgot every fucking thing he said immediately after. It was like, wait a second, was that part of the same book? Was this
Right.
a forward by somebody else that didn't know what the book was about? What's happening? What's with the bait and switch? It's like,
Yeah,
what?
it was completely unexpected when we got into it, and he was just, going on about how, it's your job to share God's truth with people, even if they call that hate speech. And in fact, he went so far as to say that, like, well, speaking truth with love in today's lexicon is defined as hate speech, but you need to do it anyway.
Oh my God. I hate it when they do that. They're like,
Yeah.
this thing is hate speech. And it's like, no, dude, hate speech is hate speech. Like there's a particular type of way of being and way of communicating. And when you do it with hateful rhetoric, that's what makes it hate speech. It's not just disagreeing. Nobody is just
Right.
saying like that just disagreeing is hate speech. That's not true.
No one is saying that. No one is trying to take away anyone's ability to in their mind and in their heart or whatever have a different idea of gender roles. Like no one is taking that from you. No one is taking gender away from you. You can still have it. You can have your gender. It's
Right.
fine. No
And
one is stopping you.
yeah, I know they're always acting like they're like something's being destroyed. I feel like like he said that a couple times. Like they're destroying the what did they say? Like they're destroying gender or something, the concept, the very concept of gender or something
Yeah.
like
Oh,
that.
they're redefining it to take away God's plan or God's blueprint. He kept talking about God's
The
blueprint.
blueprints,
You're
gender is an airplane.
Gender
Gender
is
is
an
an airplane,
airplane.
everybody.
well, like
I believe it's
yeah,
an attack helicopter, Helen.
Sorry.
I
I
was wondering.
apologize for getting my gender aircraft wrong.
Right. Do
I
not
was-
miss aircraft me, Helen.
Sorry.
Jesus
Sorry.
Christ. Oh yeah, that was, and I'm wondering because we do have a video we're gonna break down in a minute here,
Yeah.
and I wonder if he'll ever get into that. Like I wonder how fast he'll use the stupid attack
And
helicopter
for
thing.
everybody
Oh, I
that's
know.
listening, if you want to listen to this garbage book, it's free on Audible. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they want to have the transgender debate with you, I think. I'm not sure. I don't know who he's having the debate with because apparently it's God having the debate with us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's not even part of it. You
He's
know,
not even
yeah.
part of it. It's just a guy like saying that, I want to be kind, but still I don't really want to be kind to people that are different than me and don't hold my worldview. So and I
yeah,
don't think they should have rights, basically, because like I got really mad even as like my cis self because like he was also saying like I had certain duties like to bear children and like yes I am a mother but like that is not my main function of my body to procreate, and I was just like, oh my god, dude, I'm like, stop breaking things down into like simplicities because people are complicated, and I'm just like, and I was getting mad.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
and because yeah,
that's
go
what
ahead.
it is. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say that's what it's all about. Is they hate nuance. They can't handle nuance. Everything has to be. It reminds me like back in the day. I was allowed to watch taped off television, of course,
Yeah.
the Rambo movies, right? But I couldn't watch the first one because he's going against the cops, right? So there's some nuance to the good guy, bad guy, and so
Uh-huh.
that's what. And
Yeah.
that's my mom couldn't handle it. She's like, no, I mean, I'm he's the bad guy. The good guys are the bad. I don't know what's happening.
Yes, it's that. It's this idea of nuance and having to use your own brain and your own critical thinking skills to come to a conclusion that is not desirable. And he even talks about that in that one chapter in this book about, how do you make a decision? And it has this whole thing where he's like,
Oh my
some people use their own reasoning abilities or how they feel about something or their traditions or their values or like all these other things. But because you could use any of those methods to arrive at a conclusion and then later find out it was wrong or change your mind. You should not, in fact, use any of those faculties that you have. And instead, the only thing you can use to make a decision is what God tells you to do in the Bible. And that is all. And he arrives at that conclusion without making any kind of case for whether you could consistently arrive at good decisions with that or not. He just assumes that to be true and then does not address, whether or not God exists, which to me would be a necessary precondition to take for granted that his decision making process supersedes any other. But no, that's just assumed to be the case. And
It's
then
yeah, it's
it
that
somehow does,
presuppositionalism shit. It's like
yeah, it does not even address the fact that God also in the Bible that we're using to arrive at these decisions makes poor decisions and changes his mind.
right.
So
That
yes,
killed
humanity kind
me.
of
yeah,
fails
like
on its face.
didn't he like flood the world and then he sent a rainbow because one, he's gay, and two, he was like, my bad, I'm sorry, like, I gotta do sorry, I'll do a do-over, I won't do it again, I promise,
Yeah.
pinky swear I won't do it again.
Which also that always freaked me out, even as a child, when because like my family was very literal about the Bible and like believed Noah's Ark literally happened, Revelation was literally a telling of the future, and you know, they would say, and then God made the rainbow to promise that he would never flood the earth and kill all the people again. And then later we would learn about the apocalypse and the tribulations. And, you know, everybody read those Left Behind books and it was awful and people burning in the lake of fire and God destroys the earth. And I specifically had this question where I was like, hey, wait a minute. I thought that that whole rainbow thing was God promising not to destroy the earth again. And they were like, oh, no, no, no. That's God promising not to destroy the earth with a flood
With
again. He
water.
is going to
Yeah.
destroy the earth again, but just not in that same manner.
That's
So
much
better?
better. Much better.
Oh,
Better?
okay. I would rather get killed by fire.
Yeah. That's so much
You know,
worse.
drowning's
Like,
supposed to be the most peaceful way to die.
Yeah.
According to
all
I
the
guess
dead people. I don't.
all the dead people. Like, so
Well,
now
no
it's all
one's
gonna be
saying
fire and brimstone, and everything's gonna be like this terrible psychedelic trip where there's like, you know, four-headed dragons and, you know, all this crazy shit, and, you know, and a half lion, half, you know, monster. Like, I'm just like, oh my god, I'm like, somebody did too many shrooms.
Seriously, yeah. That I am stand firm in my conclusion that yeah, it's totally a shroom trip.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there is
absolutely.
no way you can read Revelation and not think that this person is having some chemical assistance to getting to this thought process.
And they might be, you know, like,
It's
and
so
you know,
bad.
because mental health diagnosis didn't exist 2,000 years ago. You know, you're just possessed by demons, and he could be like a schizophrenic
Or,
taking shrooms,
I
and
was
then
just
he
gonna say,
wrote
or
down
hearing from
everything
God,
that he saw, and I'm just like, oh no.
right?
And I've listened to some people discuss this, and I am not a Bible scholar, so you know, like I cannot speak intelligently on that subject. But I've heard someone describing it and saying it's like a particular type of literature, you know, that was popular at the time. This like apocalyptic narrative was a way of writing. Okay, fine, but have you read this? Like, this is not the writing of someone who is connected with reality. Like,
In any way, yeah, shape
yeah,
or form. It's
So
yeah, it's
this was a side
unbelievable.
tangent about how
yes, it
weird
was.
Revelation is, and how
Yeah,
we think it's a conspiracy that they did drugs.
that's
Yes, but
right.
it is the only book in the Bible that you will be blessed specifically for studying it. And yet somehow it is not the blueprint for gender, though.
No, it's not.
No, I
That's not
don't.
it.
Which I
No, the
was gonna.
blueprint is like it's nature, and then because nature, you know, because God designed nature, and like another thing that drove me kind of crazy was when he was talking about how, you know, that God made us in this image, okay, and then he goes into the Adam and Eve story, and then I'm getting kind of annoyed because like I'm like I literally said in my car to myself when he's talking this story, I'm like, you put a tree and told people that have the mind of toddlers not to touch the tree, and then you let the supposedly the bad guy in the house that tells them that it's okay to go touch the tree. And I'm like, well, duh. I'm like, of course they're gonna do it, dumb dumb. And then like, and I'm like, but your God also knew they were gonna do it. So because he can't be all knowing and not know things at the same time. That those are two contradictory ideas.
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah.
And he goes back. It was like, here's what drove me crazy was that they get stuck. He gets stuck in this eternal loop, and I feel like this was like the entire book was like that God made us all perfect, but we made us all broken, but made us all perfect, but made us all broken, and he could not
Yeah.
fucking get out of that loop. And it was just the whole thing was just him rationalizing that to himself in a book
Yes.
form.
Yes, it was constantly that. It was any way that God made you is completely perfect, and if you rebel against
Oh
that or
God.
change it in any way, you're rebelling against God, and you're not going to be able to complete His plan for you. And you're very deeply broken
Oh, I'm
because of
very broken.
sin. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
Yeah, that
which
was the thing
is
that I was
it?
getting. Like he
How do you
kept
do
saying
both
that
those?
people that were trans and non-binary were sad, and they're like, you know, they're really hurting. I'm like, all the queer people I know are all really happy and well-adjusted people. So I'm like, yeah, dude, yeah, we're all
Yeah.
all of us queers are suffering because you know we're not close
Yeah.
to God. Okay, whatever,
Yeah,
man.
and I've said this before. What causes problems for trans and non binary people is people being jerks to them and making it so that it's hard for them to exist without experiencing violence and legal exclusions and discrimination. Yes, that is hard for people when you make it so that they can't access public life or healthcare or are afraid to go outside because they're going to be attacked. Yeah, those are things that will give people mental health concerns. It's not being trans, it's being a jerk. Stop being a jerk.
They don't feel it's hard to not I mean, when you don't feel safe in place, I mean, which I would argue is like the point of why I think that people should and companies should put up flags. Everybody should, do that. So just because it signals safety, at least
Mhm.
a little bit, or at least that there's someone there that
Mhm.
you'll be safe around. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, it's like, dude, like it reminds. It's like the Southern flag. I feel like that's the exact opposite. It's like the reversal. They're not safe
Right.
here,
Yeah.
and they know that,
Yeah. And that's what that's for.
right? It's completely on purpose.
I
Yeah.
like I feel kind of bad. Like I feel a little bit bad for him because Kara and I talked about this last night. He was so close. Like
Yeah.
that he thinks that he is a good person, and I want to believe he is. Like I don't because he's not bashing people, so I guess that's a check in the positive column. But at the
Mhm.
same time, he has all this religious gobbledygook in his brain, and he's not dissecting it. So he wants to be kind to people and think that they're worthy of kindness and rights and all the things. But then on the other side of it, he he has to believe that they're broken and have to get right with God for them to be good people and within
Mhm.
themselves. And I'm just like, you can't have it both ways. Like either you accept people exactly how they are, as long as they're not hurting anybody, or you don't.
Right.
Straight up, yeah.
And he made it clear that he doesn't,
Yeah.
and he feels that he and every other Christian is now required to make sure and let all trans people know that. They can't just it's not okay according to him to just be a Christian and know a trans person and leave them alone. You have to let them know that you do not agree with them. You do not support them. You'll be nice to them. You'll love them, whatever that means, and you'll say it in a nice tone of voice with a smile on your face that you think they should be excluded from being allowed to use the bathroom or play sports or go to school or have health care or exist in public or private or, have any of the relationships that they want to be in or anything like that. And that's love.
Yeah.
And he is cognizant of the fact that that is not consistent with what most people would think the word love means, and he just, goes right past that and says, well, but this is the biblical version, therefore it is the correct one. I-
Right. Oh god, yeah, it's so
Yeah,
gross.
and
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
frustrating.
it's
Oh my
just it's
god.
just gross. And I that's what kind of frustrated me too, because I was listening to him and he's doing all these platitudes about we don't want to treat people poorly and blah blah blah. And I'm like, so I'm listening to him and I'm like, well, just because you don't understand the experience of being trans or non-binary or even queer, that doesn't mean it's wrong. And and then and then that other argument that he had about what gender roles are, and then he was trying to come from it from like this feminist perspective, which failed.
What was
Oh,
that?
I
Why
was
was
like,
he
I was like, don't bring feminism into this conversation, man, because you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah. It was like as if the Bible and fundamentalists have just been so fucking feminist this whole time, but now they happen to
yeah.
have something in common with, the Harry Potter lady who calls herself a feminist. So now they got to include their
Joanne.
fucking arguments.
Yes. Oh, and he
Ah,
even goes so far as to say, yeah, oh, well, it's always been in the Bible. Gender equality has always been in the Bible, even if the church like didn't quite understand that. It's always been in there. It's clearly enshrined that men and women are, and he uses this term that is, he almost says separate but equal. But let me see, I wrote down what he
oh,
said. It was like something so
Yeah.
stupidly close to that,
I
where he
remember
was
that.
like,
Okay.
gender, equal but different. And I was like,
Equal,
oh,
but it's basically
Well,
the
okay.
technically, you are
separate but
Okay.
correct,
equal.
sir. I am different than a man. Good for
Sure.
you.
Right.
Um, because of genetics and
Right.
evolution.
Exactly.
It has that's it.
Yeah,
So
people are all
and by the way,
different.
everybody, just so you know, you can be a man and not like football, and be a woman and not like to cook. You can. You're allowed to make choices. Isn't that
Yeah,
nice?
I don't
And
like football and I love to cook, so it's
yeah, and you may rest assured that contrary to some confusion that you might be having as a result of that, it doesn't make you trans. Did you know that?
wow, I didn't wow,
Yeah,
blowing minds over here.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
you know,
Made
little
sure to lay
girls
that
can
out
play
for
with
us.
trucks and little boys can play with dolls. And you know what? They're, you don't have to worry about them being trans. They can just do that. I'm like, thank you for giving us permission
I'm
Right.
so
to
glad I got
exist
permission
and
for that.
let people experience life the way they want to and have and like it's so stupid. Like, and I hate platitudes. I really
It is. And
do.
it's so disingenuous too, because if he were to take that line of reasoning to its logical conclusion, then people can do their gender however they want. People can be assigned female at birth and like football and play with trucks and not choose to cook and choose to not have reproductive or female reproductive organs in their body and choose to dress as a man and use the men's bathroom and take testosterone, and all of a sudden, it sounds like there's
Wait a
nothing
second.
wrong with this. Yeah, so where
You
does he
crossed the
draw the
line.
line? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
okay to like football, but it's not okay to like football and soccer, or like I don't know. Like where's the line that it's not
Like
okay
like
anymore?
he was like, I don't care for football, and I'm like, dude, I don't care. Like this is
Yeah.
a like
Just
we're not here to talk about your personal preferences.
No,
Like
that's
right.
nobody
that's
cares.
not
Like
it.
I'm like, I want to hear the debate, and all you're giving me is platitudes. So
Oh yeah.
you're just trying to conform your idea of gender with the Bible, but also living in a secular country. So I'm like, I know you're trying. I know, but you're failing, my friend. You are
Yeah.
failing.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
and
the
the title of the book was so misleading too,
Yeah.
because it makes it sound like he's going to be presenting arguments against, the existence of trans people. Not that that would be admirable, but that is what the title of the book seems to imply is going to happen. But then as you read the book, it becomes apparent that actually this is written for an audience of people who are already opposed to trans people existing or doing anything. And he spends almost no time explaining why he believes that to be true, except for that chapter about how Adam and Eve are in Genesis and it was a man and a woman, and therefore trans people weren't in Genesis, and so therefore they don't exist. Okay, but that's it.
Yeah.
That's the debate. And then he even says, "Well, this isn't a debate between me and trans people. This is a debate between God and trans people. So I'm going to tell you what God says, and as I have already explained, you are required to do that."
Jesus.
It would have been better if you had left that sentence out. That
Right?
now you speak for God. Oh, I'm so glad.
Talk about narcissistic. Like he's sitting there saying like they're, trans folks are so narcissistic because they are deciding who they are above what God created them to be. And yet here he is going, no, I decide what God says.
Yeah,
Okay.
I decide what God created you to be. And by the way, women, your job is to have babies. And
Right. That is
Yeah, he
well,
kind of
Car, you
yeah,
and I
heavy-handed
both own a
that.
uterus, so that's the job.
that's our job. And I
That's
am
the job.
failing at that. So
Yeah,
I don't
I already did
know.
it, and I'm fixed. I'm a cat. I got
Yeah.
spades, so
I think that's
I
also
got
not
shut
allowed,
down for business.
Helen.
Thank you
You're
very
not
much.
That's not the way God made you. You're doing it wrong.
Well,
I'll see.
I
You're
guess
the
I'm going to
kitty
hell.
litter person in Florida. I
Yeah,
knew it.
I know.
I knew it.
I
Damn.
am. Yes.
I love it.
Jesus.
I love
And
it.
I'm going to go to schools and get the other kids to use the litter box. That's
Right.
the goal.
That's I knew it's a
I'm
slippery
gonna
slope,
Yeah.
infiltrate them. Yeah.
Just starts rolling
Mhm.
down the mountain. Uh
Was anybody else bothered by the fact that he kept repeatedly coming back to this line of thinking where he was saying, you have to do God's plan for your life, and God's plan for the genders
The
is that,
genders.
yeah, the genders. Men are protectors and women are nurturers, and we have to both be able to do those things because there's two missions in life. One of them is that we have to subdue and subjugate and dominate the earth and nature and all of the animals in it. He kept coming back to that. And then
Yeah.
the other piece was you have to be able to procreate and make more babies. And and then the definition of a man is someone who can, how did he put it? It was like the grossest definition I've ever heard of, but it was like you have to be able to become one flesh sexually with a woman. That is the definition of a man, and
Yeah,
the definition of a woman is someone who can sexually become one flesh with a man.
Oh,
that's what.
that's
Yeah,
what
I remember that. I
okay.
heard
I'm
that.
so glad that's what you because I was
Yeah.
so confused at that. I was like, what the fuck? Like what your definition can't have like according to you guys you guys is like own like argument, you can't have like definitions that function that way, and then there they are doing it. Like this is the definition.
Which is so
Wow.
Every part of that
gross
was so
because, like,
gross
what
to
if
me.
you're
It's
so
so
I hate to I mean like if I explain to them that asexual people exist that
Mhm.
are sex repulsed or they just don't see that as an important part of having like an intimate relationship.
Oh,
You
they're
know,
rebelling against God's
they're
plan.
rebelling against it. And I'm like, yeah, but
What
dude, like what if you can't have sex? Like what if you have like a biological problem that you are unable to have sex? That means you're not worthy of having a loving, caring relationship with another person, like just
No,
because, your junk don't work. Like I
being
don't get
punished for
it.
sin.
Yeah, I
You're
mean,
yeah,
sinful.
right.
it
It's your
just
fault somehow.
Yeah, that was one of them like generational curses or something that stops you
yeah,
being with
well,
them,
there's
right?
I mean, like there's a demon in the womb, I guess, or in your penis if it
In the
doesn't
womb.
Right.
work.
Womb demons.
A womb
I
demon
call
or
them
a
Woombas.
penis demon.
But
Woombas.
I hate it's funny too, like you were saying, like the separate but equal thing with the genders, how they work. It was like I remember that, and that was always my argument back when in the day. I was like, look, like women and men are equal, okay? It's just that women are actually more important. That's why they need to stay the fuck at home and just never leave and make my dinner and do all this stuff. It's because they're more special. They have the baby. Like that's even more special. That's why we gotta put them under glass like a baseball card, and and
Yes. Like I own them because they're so special. I collect them.
Right. like we're My Little Ponies or something.
right?
My
And
Little Woman.
yeah, and just so the chat knows, we are going to get to the chat. We're going to start
Yep.
doing the video,
Yeah.
and we'll
Yep.
we'll start reading some of the chat. We'll put up some of the comments. So
Yeah. Before we do that, I'm going to take a bio break
no
because
problem. Yeah,
world's worst bladder. So give me 1 minute, and I need to refill my drink because my medications make me really thirsty. It's just a cycle.
that's all right. I quit drinking, so I still have to just do the hand to mouth thing all the time.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So I'll be right back. I'll
I
be
get
like
it.
3 minutes, maybe less.
Good time.
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
it was a wild listen to say the least. Do you feel like you had a bet? Like I know I don't want to take it from Noah, but it is such a good like way to put it. Do you have a best worst?
Ooh, man. Okay. So, it's hard to even think of the worst. I feel like the worst is a tie between his definition of a man and a woman, which I'm still not entirely clear on what that was. Like I still don't know what it means to be able to become one flesh with a man or with a woman. That sounds so incredibly vague that I feel like anyone could theoretically fulfill that.
Right? I mean, technically, I could become one flesh with anybody.
Yeah, which
Technically,
right, like if
one
that's
way or
what we're
another.
calling spicy times is becoming one flesh, which that is such a gross, weird term to use for that in the first place. But like, if that's what you're calling it, I mean, that sounds like pretty much anyone could qualify.
Seriously, yeah, and it's God. What for people that like are saying that you shouldn't ever think of sex, like they have the thought crimes that surround sex. Like if you even lust after a woman in your heart, then you fucked her, or whatever. But
Yeah.
like, for people that are like that, like why do they think about sex all the time? Like that's all they can think about. It's so weird.
It's bonkers to me. I'm like, that's in your book that is a discussion of your definition of gender. The definition is sex, and not biological sex, but the action.
Right. The it's yeah, what a weird way to put it. Where it's just like, yeah, the man and woman is defined by them how having sex with the other one. Like that's like how weird. I don't know.
I'm
It's just
feeling a loophole in here somewhere.
right. I mean that he's clearly got sex on the brain.
Right,
It's
right.
weird too. It reminds me like I can't remember who I was talking to. It was some conservative I ran into and was talking. I can't shut my mouth. I'm the worst. I always have to say stuff and speak up, and people,
Speaking truth with love. It's okay. It's required of you.
right. Yeah, that's right. I'm doing their thing. So, I mean, he said I had to. So, when I was bringing it up, and I was like, yeah, it's just like you could say to kids, like sometimes men love men, and that's okay. And I was like, why would you talk about sex to kids? And I was like, fucking what, man? What are you talking about? I said that sometimes men love men, like they love men. Like I didn't say
Right.
anything about sex. You can love without doing that, man. Like
Yeah.
Jesus,
Apparently not for some people. I don't know. But, they're
bizarre.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was wild to me. I couldn't get over that. I was like, that's what you landed on. And this is the crowd that's gonna sit here and say, trans people don't exist because it's, so contrary to biology and common sense and the clear definitions of the words, male and female. And then you come to me with this definition of what a man and a woman is. Like,
the most unclear definition possible. It's unreal. My goodness. Ugh, it's so frustrating.
yeah.
Just dealing with these conversations in general, and and it was like there's like I think it was like a 4-minute video. It was not long at all, and it did such a good job because I just Googled, like how to explain or transgender people explained, right? Just like the
Yeah.
basics, and it was like, look here, there's all this stuff that makes up our XY chromosomes, our brain chemistry, which we're doing more research and finding out that our brain chemistry is actually gendered one way or the other,
Mm.
or both, right? And it tends to align. It's crazy. The brain structure tends to align with the gender identity more so than it does the other parts of your genitals and XY chromosomes. But like all three of those things like work together a lot of times, and a lot of people have them all line up.
Mhm.
So it's actually sex itself is very complicated. Like it's not this like
Yes.
penis and vagina, beavis and butthead, like thing that's just like that
No.
simple.
No, it's not. There's multiple complex factors that are interacting with each other and with the environment that come together to produce this array of
Mhm.
characteristics, this array of ranges of characteristics that are typical of this sex. And yeah, like you said, for a lot of people, all of these different factors all kind of line up together within a certain range that is typical of one particular sex. But it's also very common that some of those
Mhm.
factors don't align with the others. And you can be a cisgender person and have some of those factors not align, and you still identify as, whatever sex you were assigned at birth, and that's fine. But it's so much more complex than just, oh, if you have this, you're a man, if you have this, you're a woman. No, it's a whole array of things that happen to line up in a certain range in a certain way. And some of them will align and some of them won't. And then for some people, less of them align. And then, it's just, it, people are complicated. And it's like we were talking about earlier, a lot of this kind of pushback, I think, against just trans people in general is this idea that, it's not that complicated. Things are not black and white. Life actually requires you
Mhm.
to think about things with some nuance and use your brain and your critical thinking skills and learn things that you didn't know previously.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the thing about the infection of religion, though, is because for them to actually look at it, in an objective way, it's like, maybe I need to separate my emotions and my preconceived ideas about this and like really look at it for what it is. That's going against their sky daddy, and their sky daddy's very concerned about genitals and gender roles and being worshipped. Those are the three things. And if
Three
you don't,
weird
if you
things.
go out of line with that, you're gonna, burn in hell. So,
Yeah. And don't
it's
ask
just
questions.
sad.
Don't
No,
ask
no.
questions. That's
Don't ask
not
questions.
Not allowed to do that. No thinking.
No thinking. No thinking. As he clearly explained in this book, thinking is not a good way to arrive at decisions because you could think about something and then get to the wrong decision. Since that's possible, we should not use that method of coming to decisions. So we can only use the 100% guaranteed method, which is reading what God said in the Bible, because no one has ever come to a wrong conclusion by doing
I was
that.
gonna say, like, nobody's ever read the Bible and then said, like, hey, this seems reasonable. I'm gonna stone my neighbor because he's working on the Sabbath.
Right.
This seems reasonable and good to me.
Well, and they all disagree. Like that's
Right.
not even like there's no standard even. Like
No.
Wow.
No, the author of this book cleared that up for us too. He speaks for God. What he tells you is
Right.
what God is saying, so you can just listen to him.
he's got the right doctrine.
He's
Okay, of
got
course.
the
Yeah.
direct line.
Listen, if it wasn't for all these secular laws or telling people not to stone their neighbors for going to church on Sunday,
The world would be a better place.
we would have a much more holier existence.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
We'll start to take a look at this piece of
Yeah.
shit. Oh, whoops. Okay. Hold up. All right. All right. Now this is this guy. Yeah. Okay. So his name is Andrew Walker. Okay. And then here's the name of the book that he got, and he's doing like a little section or kind of, I guess, a summary is how they do a lot of these, right?
Oh, this is the one where he starts out by saying, we're blessed that he's talking about this with us today, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Video, but
Yeah.
I think I turned it off after he said that.
This will be all new to me.
This is new to me after like 30 seconds in.
So, yeah, exactly.
I love Happy Pride, y'all.
So here's Uncle Duke on his book. Here we go. So we'll stop it. Just raise your hand and I'll pause it as we go.
So this is a providential moment that I would come up here and speak at this very time, because I was just looking at Twitter. Forgive me, Richard. But the very first
Is Richard not allowed? Is he not allowed to?
Candidate has just won a slot in the Virginia House of Delegates. The very first transgendered public official, I believe, in United States history. So let that be a reminder that we are living in a new day in an American context. And that this issue is not something that just exists in the news or exists elsewhere, but is making its way to all of us, and very quickly. As Brandon mentioned, I have written a book called God and the Transgender Debate. And there's lots of different ways I could talk about themes from that book tonight. But what I'm going to do tonight is kind of boil down what I'm calling kind of the 6 key truths around the transgender debate that I'm kind of pulling from my book. And before I kind of get into those 6 truths, I want to go over the language around.
Hold on, real quick. Is that a normal thing, like in philosophy and stuff like that? Do you just say like these are the key truths? Is that a thing that people say?
No,
No,
I feel
normally
like concepts maybe, but like truths.
concepts, propositions,
arguments.
This guy seems to be doing something, and I don't want to say this is something that he in particular has made up doing. This is something I hear from like apologists a lot, where they replace words with, instead of the one that normal people would use to say, I'm going to make 6 key points, or I'm going to present 6 arguments or 6 premises. They just insert instead another word like, I'm going to tell you 6 truths, and just completely redefine a word, which is ironic because that's what he's about to accuse trans people of doing, is redefining words. And there is nothing but him doing that throughout this. Like the title of his book, The Transgender Debate, if you read it in the first chapter of the book, it seems like he just went out of his way to avoid saying the word identity. And in every place that the sentence would normally say transgender identity, he just says the word transgender debate. Like, so he'll just be talking about, people who have, decided that they have a transgender debate or something. Debate?
That's
What are you
right.
talking about?
This is not how real people talk, man. When we're having discussions, we have words that have context and definitions that
Right.
we all agreed upon as people. And
Right.
you're making up your own. So by the way, so I'm gonna start redefining words.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently that's allowed,
I'm
and
gonna do it.
considering that that's about to be the thing that he's going to say trans people are doing, I just find that highly
Like, I'm
ironic.
going to say that Andrew Walker now means transphobe, and that's the definition now.
There you go. Yeah, it's funny too because it almost reminds me of something like Trump would do if he was like, instead of Twitter, he would come up with something, to redefine a tweet and maybe call it like a truth or something. I don't know. It just sounds stupid. Like he was something.
Alternative facts, Brentley. So
Right, we're dealing with alternative facts here.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Oh Jesus.
Oh,
All
Lordy,
right.
okay.
Debate, because there's so much contested use of the language that unless we understand
There it
the
goes.
terms that we're using,
Oh my God, he's doing
we're
it.
going to be
He's
at a
doing it.
disadvantage in how we engage with the culture around us. And these terms are sex, gender, gender identity, gender dysphoria, and transgenderism. I'm going to go over those very quickly.
That's not
First
the
of all-
word that people are using.
Transgenderism.
Transgender.
No.
It's not an
ism.
ism. It's people. It's like Jesus Christ.
It's not a disease you're going to catch.
Right. Yeah. And it's not like objectivism or some shit, like some made up
It's not a
philosophy.
philosophy. Like I am
Yeah.
good. I have I want to talk about the philosophy of transgenderism. Like what I feel like. What does that
It's
mean?
again, yes, it's
It's an
taking
idea.
away people's identity and people's experience
Yeah.
and describing it as if these people are proposing a brand new idea that they want to submit to this guy for approval in his debate. And guess what? No one is debating this with you. People are just existing. That's all. It's not a debate. Just stop it.
Right, because that's what that's my question. And it's funny because every time I'm talking to somebody who's a transphobe that's trying to pretend like they're not, right? I go, what do you want them to do? What do you want to have happen to them? Like if you had, and I love this question, it really makes them think. You say, like, if you had complete control of everything, what would you do? What would you have them do? And their answers like are always not be trans. And I'm like, okay, but that's not a thing that can happen. So
Right.
then what? And they're like, well, then they should not be allowed to be trans. I'm like, dude, you're not getting what I'm saying. Like, so you want them gone, you want them out, you want them away, and it's like they don't put that together in their brains until you corner them with those kinds of questions. And then you can see why when fucking Michael Knowles went there and like basically had to, define genocide to be like, hey, cool, it's not genocide because it doesn't have to do with genetics, but and then act like he didn't call for, genocide, because he redefined it. But it's, I don't know, it's they don't want to think that they are being as awful as they are being.
Yeah, which I understand not wanting to think that, but another option is to quit being that awful. Like, here's the thing. Trans people don't have the option to quit being trans, but he does have the option to quit saying awful things to them.
Exactly.
Because you're responsible for the things you say and do. So,
Right. And of course, that is his argument back. He says in the book about how, well, maybe you can't help that you have gender dysphoria, but you can help that you express your gender identity. You should just not do that. Like,
yeah,
okay.
right. You have to conform because your genitals are your gender. That's the rules, man. It's just like, well,
tells you gender
I'm like, my
roles.
genitals don't tell me how to make decisions. Well, sometimes.
For
they don't tell me how to dress. They don't tell me how I treat other people. They don't have brains. Like sometimes I converse with my vagina, but it's usually like, you're a very nice vagina and I appreciate that, you're great.
Yeah, it's like a semi
but
first
it's
name
all
basis.
dumb because I'm like, this is not how real people behave. Like like I asked a family member, like, a few months ago when I went to visit, I go, does your penis is your penis your personality? And he said yes. And I go, is it really? And I go, I know that's your natural thing to say, but I go, if you really think about it, no, because your penis did not form, everything about your identity. Like,
No.
so stop
No.
being silly.
Exactly. And it's so interesting that they like demand, and this just kind of shows just how spoiled these people are. They're so spoiled and they're so fucking entitled that you're absolutely right. They demand that you change. You have to conform, but they couldn't possibly, because that's just a bridge too far asking me to change anything. You change,
It's
It's like,
too much to
No.
even ask them to not accost people about their gender. Like, no, you cannot ask me to do that. It's my job, according to him, as a Christian, to make sure that every trans person he meets knows at all times that he does not agree with their gender identity, and he needs them to know that they are in violation of God's rules and they are in rebellion against God, and everything they're doing is wrong. And he's going to do that kindly. And I'm sorry, but
I'm
that
gonna
is
use my
not
nice
kind.
voice.
that's
That is
not
not
possible.
kind.
It's
Yeah.
like
You are
it
not
sounds when
being
you talk to
kind.
children and you're like, what you're doing is wrong right now, right? You
Yeah.
should apologize. Like you're infantile.
Right.
That like
Yes.
that's the type of way that they speak to people.
Yes.
And
It
Yeah.
is 100% that. It is so condescending.
presenting, and instead of seeing people as complex, full individuals that are just not making decisions willy-nilly.
I,
I
right.
mean, like, we'll watch more of the video, but this is like
Real
he says
quick.
some shit.
Yeah, but real quick, can you imagine, like, okay, let's put it this way. What if I said that cannibalism is so evil that if somebody even pretends to do it, they shouldn't get medical care. And so anybody that's ever practiced communion no longer has access to medical care. How bad do you think they would fucking lose their goddamn gourds over that? Not
Oh,
that
yeah.
that's any similar at all, but I'm just saying, like, I could frame an argument the way they are, like, kind of
Well,
by, taking
Yeah.
their rights away the same way. You know what I mean?
Oh,
well,
100%.
from their perspective, and this is completely wrong, that people that are trans or non-binary, or even if you have a queer identity, that you are living outside of reality. So,
Mhm.
if you take communion, you're kind of living outside of reality. So, you could kind of make the same argument if you really wanted to, because it's like, well, you think that all of us are doing imaginary
Well,
stuff. Like I'm like, you literally think that bread and wine turn to the and blood and body of your 2,000-year-old carpenter that died on a cross for you and rose from the dead like a zombie. Like, really, dude? Like, really?
I mean, if we're talking about like what's weird, because that's what I'll say a lot of times in response to, like, you don't get to say they're weird if you think it's a normal thing to pretend to cannibalize a carpenter on a fucking stick, man. All right, you can't do that. You don't get to say that. Like,
Right. Yeah. It's like
One of us
the
is
people
clearly
who are,
wrong.
yes, the people who are accusing other people of making factually inaccurate statements and living outside of reality are the same ones who are believing in things that are clearly, demonstrably false. And guess what? Their rights aren't being taken away. They're not being persecuted. No one is telling them, like you said, that, oh, you can't have health care because you pretended to engage in a cannibalistic ritual. You can't receive access to public spaces because you believe in, invisible sky people. You can't allow to use a bathroom now. Like, no one
right.
would do that. Like, that's not happening. And yet they feel that it is not only their right, but their responsibility to do that to other people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's not
Responsibility.
being
So
kind.
I have a
You are not
responsibility to be a
being kind.
bigot.
it's entitled. It's
Yeah.
so entitled.
Oh, it's so
Responsibility.
entitled. It's just mind blowing.
They're like children. It's like, oh God. All right, let's see we'll let him get into at least a little bit
So
of
this
his
Well,
One
point
of
of
the
you'll
view.
be quiet
truths,
for
at least.
biological
The
perspective,
truth.
a minute.
understanding that God has made us male and female, as it says in Genesis 1 and 2. He made us male and female in his image. And when God made us male and female, he knit the difference of being made male and female down to the level of our chromosomes.
I
But if
remember
you
that
are a
chapter in
male,
Genesis where we learn about chromosomes, don't
Yeah,
y'all?
I did.
Fucking
We
what
learned
now?
science in the. Did we learn science in the Bible? Did we?
Yeah, no, I don't. I don't think so. I don't remember that passage at all. In fact,
It's XY and XX. Jesus.
anybody that has anything other than that just isn't
Listen.
real because they were not mentioned in Genesis. There were only 2 people in Genesis, so there can't ever be more than 2 people at a time on the earth because that's the blueprint in Genesis.
Would
Just so
it
you
blow
know.
his mind that people that present cis het like have more than might not just have XX and XY chromosomes, that they might have like a combination or a different
Right.
helix going on, like which has been proven in science that this happens. Like, would it blow his mind?
Right, right.
Yes, Anshir, yes, that's important.
Yes. Oh, it's incredible to me, the stuff that gets presented as, oh, now we're going to tell you what the Bible says about science. Are you sure? Are you the same person that is next going to tell me that the Earth is 6,000 years old and evolutionism is a lie from Satan? Because I don't know how you get to appeal to biology at the same time as saying that.
Satan
I don't know.
Listen, Satan put all the fossils on different layers in the Grand Canyon and other parts of the earth because he's full of trickery.
Right.
Oh, it was a trick. I wonder if chromosomes are a trick too. Have they considered that?
It is theory, it's part.
Like, can you see your chromosomes? Can you?
Right.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. And I wonder if, since the blueprint is Adam and Eve were created male and female, and they were also created as adults, and that's the blueprint for life in Genesis that we cannot go against because it's God's plan. I wonder if children exist. Do you think that is also not real?
They're not allowed to. They can't.
Yeah. I mean, Adam and Eve were not children; they were adults. Therefore, children don't exist. I guess. I mean, that must be the.
Well,
I think that's the logic
like,
we're
just
using
a
here,
little
right?
side note on that topic. It's like, okay, well, so my kind of understanding that Adam and Eve didn't fuck until they realized that they developed like that part of enlightenment of their brain where like God punishes Eve, like, this, like, you're gonna bear kids and it's gonna hurt. Like, did he just expect, like, with his creation that Adam and Eve would just be forever like living in the garden, or did he expect more people?
Oh,
to
this
show
must
up?
be the Catholic version of
Yeah,
the
this is
story.
the
We didn't
Catholic
have
version,
that in
yeah.
my school.
Yeah.
Okay, so they
Yeah, I
were
was gonna say.
celibate until after. Oh, that makes sense though in the I guess the theology though.
Yeah.
If childbirth is a punishment
Yes.
for, it's like a punishment for
Oh.
being
Yeah.
a quote unquote slut, then okay, so then
Yep.
they weren't having sex until she could be properly punished for
Right,
it.
'cause she
Okay,
was
got
pure.
it.
Oh my God, that
then-
makes
Got
so
it.
much
Satan
sense.
shows because that-
Like,
because
it doesn't,
the
but it
reason-
does.
Yeah,
because
separate but
that's the
different,
original
y'all, or
sin.
different but
Fucking-
equal.
That's
Right.
why you get baptized when you're a baby, to cleanse the sin of your parents because they had sex. And it goes
Oh.
back and back and back and back to Eve when she fucked Adam. And then that was the first original sin because she seduced Adam into eating the fruit.
Yeah,
Unreal.
that makes
This
sense.
is the
That's-
Catholic version. So I'm just saying.
Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
that's interesting. I didn't ever
Every
have
religion
that
has their weird
version.
shit.
No,
Isn't it interesting
that's
how
new to me.
people using the Bible to come to conclusions come to completely different conclusions?
Yeah.
Ain't that something?
Huh.
You
Huh,
know?
that's
Sorry,
weird.
know
I
it's a
thought we
side
heard
tangent,
earlier
but
that
it just
that was
because when
reliable.
because
Yeah.
I want to.
You have to presuppose it's
I want to
reliable.
watch. I want to ask Andrew this question. I'd be like,
Oh,
by
yeah.
the way,
Oh, let's have the debate with him. Let's see if he gets to
I'm
any
going
of
to
his
see.
Yeah,
truth.
I
I'm
mean,
going to see if I'm
so
going to
far-
be convinced.
Right? Yeah. I mean, he really hasn't even gotten to any truths yet. But
you have XY chromosomes.
Okay.
Oh.
And if you're a female, you have XX chromosomes.
I like
And
how he
so
had to
again,
check his
God has
notes to
knit-
make sure he got that right.
Which one is the X? Oh yeah, yeah.
X,
They
To
got
X,
the
be
two.
X.
fair,
yes.
to
They
be
got
fair,
the
I
both-
forget sometimes
both
too.
seasons.
I'm like, do I have X, Y, or X? Like, I forget. So, like, to be
Well, I
fair.
love when people like argue with you about how, it is so obvious that like everyone's sex and therefore their gender is determined by their chromosomes. And every single person that I've had this conversation with, I've asked, so like, when did you get the lab results back that told you your chromosomes?
Right.
And not one of them has had that. Like, So
listen.
that's not what you're
I
using, is
I
it?
can't do the cis female thing unless I know my chromosomes. Like that's the
Right.
rule.
You
The
can't.
rules.
Ellen, you have no way of knowing what your gender is right now. If you haven't checked to see what chromosomes you have no idea what gender you are, I'm sure. I mean, that's how that works, right?
We're all
I
lying.
mean,
Like, so you're really the pure
it's up in
form
the
of
air.
Kara because you're non-binary. So you're
Right.
you're in between. So it's just
Yeah.
like,
I'm just letting y'all
It's
know
me
I
and-
haven't gotten the
it's me
lab
and
results
Brent.
back yet. I'm just being honest here.
Right.
I mean,
We're
I'm
all
sh-
pretty
I'm
much
just-
Schrodinger's genitals. You know what I mean? Like that's that's all the time. Jesus.
I love it.
Goodness.
Great.
The absolute depth of difference down to the level of our chromosomes. And then there's what we call the primary sex characteristics related to their biological sex. And this is kind of the differences in men's and women's reproductive systems. Then there's what's called secondary sex characteristics. And these
It's
are kind
like
of the
he's hearing
general
about this
phys-
information for the first time rather than like getting it from introductory high school biology.
Right.
Like, did he miss
Right.
that class?
Like, did
I'm
I learn this?
confused.
I learned this.
Probably
in
wasn't allowed to,
sixth-
you know.
I think I learned this in 6th grade. Like, like I'm like, yeah, this is secondary sexual characteristics, and
It's like he's teaching us new information.
no, because to be fair, a lot of his audience probably hasn't had this education, so he's
They're not allowed.
Sure.
That's you
fair.
know.
Yeah.
They banned it in this state, so I don't.
That's
like-
true. We weren't allowed to have sex education when I was a kid. They didn't have it at the school that I went to because, then we would.
I
don't know.
When you and I
Yeah,
have
me
another
neither.
conversation, I can tell you about the weird sex class you have when you're a Catholic, but that's not why we're having this conversation. But I'll
Right.
tell you.
I
Yeah.
love it.
I
I'm
was
here for it.
homeschooled and given a book that I honestly did not read. I pretend I said that I did and I didn't, and they were just like, "Good enough," and that was it. That was all it was.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I got a pamphlet that was literally from the 70s. That it was just a pamphlet, and this was to replace sex education, and it was actually it was like produced by Kotex or something, but it was very, very dated, and it was talking about period products, because that's the only thing you need to know if you are assigned female and you are a person that has a period. Like, sex education is just knowing how to, take care of your period, I guess, and how to not become pregnant, but just that you will become pregnant, and this is your life now. But it was so dated that the information in it was about things like these like period belts that were like I guess they didn't have like adhesive on the back of the
Right? Yeah,
pads,
you had to wear it around,
and it was like around your waist.
Yeah.
This was in the 90s, y'all.
You had to wear a belt,
We
a
have
tampon belt.
gone far superior to our menstrual products now. So
That
but, like,
seems
wearing a
even
belt.
date. That seems more like Dark Ages type of
Yeah,
shit.
like
That was
when people were using rags.
Yeah, it was like that. It was like that, and it was stuff like you got to be careful, not to do sports or something, and you got to wear this period belt thing.
No, we're
and
white.
yeah, it was all this stuff, and I was just reading it, and you could tell from like the graphics on the front of this very old pamphlet that this was decades old and produced by this was supposed to come with like a box of Kotex or something.
Were you allowed
original.
to use? Were you allowed to use tampons, or are they devil sticks?
Oh, no, I was not
Okay.
allowed to use tampons because that would make you not a virgin,
Right.
according to
That's
our
how
beliefs.
that works.
what?
I guess that's how you
Really?
become one flesh with an inanimate object or something. I don't know. Oh, that's
Because
how
that's
tampons
a concern in the Catholic
men.
Church too.
Yeah,
If
so
you
the
use a
tampon must be a man.
There was there's a concern that your hymen will break, and then you're not a virgin anymore. So like tampon equals penis.
Yes.
So, and then you're just chewed up gum after that.
Yes,
you know,
Yeah.
'cause
we
of-
got that one too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Jesus
the
Christ.
purity culture wasn't so weird, and I mean we had our own purity shit, but it was just like, hey, if you have sex before you get married, you're gonna go to hell. That was it.
Oh no, we got
Yeah.
all the chewed up gum, the used
Oh, yeah,
tennis
we didn't get that.
shoes,
Yeah.
the tape that won't stick anymore, and my personal favorite, the
Never heard that one.
Horcrux. Yeah,
The
this was
Horcrux?
yeah. Now they
The
didn't use that
Horcrux?
term at the time because this was pre Joanne.
Okay.
But it was the argument went that every time you had sex with someone, your
Okay.
flesh became one. So this does circle back around to what we're talking about. That's how you become one flesh. But then when you separate, you're no longer one flesh, but because our bodies are like tape, and so if you stick tape together and then rip it apart, like some pieces of this tape might get left behind stuck to that one, like it'll tear, and so there might be some pieces stuck, and somehow the metaphor becomes not your body parts, but your soul parts. And so
Wow.
once you have sex with someone, and then I don't know how the mechanism works, because it seems like this would still happen if you had sex with the same person repeatedly, but they didn't really discuss that. But the way the argument went was, once you had sex with someone, you're one flesh, and that means you're one soul, because those words are interchangeable. And so once you separate, it's like ripping apart a thing that was one thing, and so you'll both be broken and you'll be missing pieces, and some of their pieces will be stuck to you and some of your pieces will be stuck to them. And then when you go do it again with somebody else, it happens again and again, and each time you lose a piece of your soul because it gets left behind, stuck to the other person's genitals, I guess, metaphorically. And so then you don't have a
But what if you
soul
shower?
left
Does it come
anymore.
off? Like
I don't know. Like, I don't know if you can get other people's soul off of you,
I'm just
or
How do
if
you
it's
clean?
stuck
I'm
forever.
just sitting here of thinking all the people I've ever had sex with and thinking about how much of my sticky tape is attached to other people.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and I got other sticky tape on me.
Yeah.
Got a
Oh,
bunch of souls all
you
in there.
you
You're
run
like Freddy
out of
Krueger. He
tape.
opens his shirt.
Your tape eventually becomes not sticky anymore, and
Oh,
or you don't have a soul left anymore. And so it's unclear if that means you can still go to heaven or not, because you don't, you're just only Horcruxes at that point in time.
well,
Oh,
female, that's
right.
how you
Just
get
like
eternal life. That's how you get eternal life. That's the Horcrux.
stick to all the other
Yeah.
people. And then you
So,
just
be
exist in
careful.
them. Like being John Malkovich.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
there you
Physical
go.
differences between adult men and women. So you can think in this category of body shape, emotional differences between men and women,
Oh boy.
and our
Oh boy.
voice differences.
They're not they're not
Voice
even that different.
differences. Voice
What?
differences. Okay.
Oh my god.
All right. So, like, if
Oh
you're a
my
woman and you have a deep voice that falls within the typically male range, are you a man?
Sexy.
This is
No,
what
you're
I'm saying.
sexy. Sorry.
Because these, anytime they try to do, and see, this is where it gets like with the nuance, right? Because anytime you try to take one thing and try to, and this is where it was kind of funny because Matt Walsh sort of fucked himself in his own analogy when he was saying like, oh, so he's like, but a man has two legs, and they're like, what if they lost a leg? And he's like, oh, but well, that doesn't make them not a man anymore. And it's like, okay, then you just proved yourself wrong, dumb fuck.
Right. So that's not a determining factor.
right. So now we move. It was
Like
just
when we
hilarious.
call, like, I'm sorry to bring up Fight Club, but this is relevant to the conversation. If someone loses their testicles, are they no longer a man? We would say no.
Right. No, because that's not what
Yeah,
makes you a man.
right.
There are people that are born like that have conditions where they have, they're like basically cut in half basically from just the waist up,
Yeah.
have those conditions and they don't have any genitals, right? And so are they not a man or woman? Like, well, how does that work? Because that's not that's not what makes a man or woman. It's complicated. There's a whole bunch of things that make
Right.
a
Like,
man and a woman a woman.
what about a
It's not.
woman that gets breast cancer, like, and has to get a double mastectomy, but decides not to get breast implants? Is she no longer a woman because she doesn't have her boobs anymore? It's like, no, obviously not. We would still recognize them as a woman because we don't take secondary sexual traits and say this what makes you the gender you are.
Right. It's just
We go, how do you identify? Oh, you're not a man now because you lost your boobs. Okay.
Right. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
much more
it's not.
complicated than
So
that.
it's way more
Yeah.
complicated.
And it's
And
not hard to understand actually if you're trying either. It's complicated, it's complex, and it's also easy
Simple.
to understand because we're all doing this. This is how we have all arrived at our understanding of our own gender for the most part.
Yeah.
It wasn't based on I went to the doctor when I was 14 and got a test of my chromosomes and now I know my gender. That's not how anyone has discovered this. You
No.
might go and discover that you have different chromosomes than you had expected. You could discover that. But
Oh yeah.
I bet you had developed a sense of gender identity before that happened. I'm just guessing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's not the thing that determines it for you. You know what I mean?
Right.
Wow. Yeah, you know what it reminds me of too? It's like you said how it's like it's complicated, but it's simple to understand. It's
Mhm.
almost like what every time I've had conversations about objective morality, you know, like objective morality is simple, like don't hurt people or whatever like that. But when people like start to question you on it, it can be really inconsistent because you're like, okay, well, there could be certain times where it actually is moral to hurt a poor person, and you're getting in the mire there. But at the same time, we all know objectively what is right and wrong in certain regards. You know what I mean? For the most part, right?
Yeah.
But when you get in the mire, it gets kind of complicated. It gets more difficult, which is why we can't really say that it is objective, right? But we kind of know that it's objective too. You know, it's so
Because yeah, like I mean, and because it's objective to us, because it's simple, like don't cause other people harm. That's it.
that's it. Do no
Like
harm. Yeah.
It can be based on an objective
Yeah.
standard,
yeah,
and you can define what that is and say, this is what I am basing this on. I think it is moral if people adhere to these things. And we recognize that life is messy, and there may be situations where we have to take into account the totality of the circumstances and make a decision that is imperfect, that is based on imperfect information, that is going to be weighing a series of factors that point this way and a series of factors that point that way, and having to make a determination the best we can. And we're probably still making that determination based on those factors that we identified as fundamental to our sense of morality. And yeah, you can do that. And yeah, it is going to never be all black and white, because that's not how real life is. And again, that seems to be the thing that is really a sticking point for people that are sort of in this crowd that we're watching here today.
That's exactly why I think it's quite similar, right? Because it's like it's never going to be totally consistent all the time, and it requires context, and that's fine. And there's nothing wrong with things having to be kind of complicated and maybe stuff that you're not used to. It's fine. Like,
Yeah, except that is in conflict with the idea that whatever I read in the Bible in Genesis chapter 1, verse 4 is now the only answer to all of life's questions. Okay, well, if that is what you're going with, you're going to have a problem making that match with reality.
I
Yeah,
don't
I can
know
see how we're having trouble.
the
I
internet
just
then
don't know
too,
how
but
you exist in the modern world. Like, I
yeah,
do not know how you exist in the modern world and still think this book is real and true. Like, the book is real. The book's real.
It
but,
exists.
Like, true.
This
like,
is a
the
book that
stuff in the
exists.
book.
it's
Yeah,
the same way that this whole debate is happening. I think
Yeah.
because repetition mind fucks people. It completely
Yeah, I
mind fucks
know.
people
Yeah.
in this 24-hour news cycle that is just beating this like, hey, make sure you hate trans people, make sure you hate trans people, make sure you over and over again. They're getting people that never would be cruel to anybody ever to be cruel to people for
Like,
because
scary.
they've been brainwashed
Scary. Yeah.
into it.
I understand it, but it gets very frustrating to me because like, and I think that's just because like I had bad ideas, but I was never fundamental about them, and I gradually changed my mind. And then I realized like, oh, I don't know shit. Let me learn some stuff. But like for other people, I understand that they're isolated, but there's also part of them like, but like information's at your fingertips. Like you can just take your phone and be like, are baboons similar to humans, and then like look up the information, and it's very frustrating to be living in the modern era where I hear people that think that the earth is 6,000 years old, and trans people are delusional and queer people are sinning and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Exhausting.
The information is there. It's just that
Repressed.
accessing that information would require an admission that the book that you've been going by this whole time may not have all the answers in it that you need. And that's, I think, for a lot of people, the block
I don't
that
think baboons
they're not
are
willing to
mentioned
get
in the
past.
Bible.
I don't remember
I
the
don't
part
either.
about chromosomes actually
I don't
either. This is
either.
the first I'm hearing of that.
And he just sort of breezed over that. He didn't really even address
He was
it.
like,
Is that citation for that one?
Move on.
Can we name it like verse and chapter? Come on, let's.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I would be sitting there going, hey, where in the Bible let's talk about chromosomes? Hey, tell me, Andrew. Tell me.
Yeah, you get the hand. You just see one hand up.
Yeah.
in the
Excuse me.
shadow, like shadow.
The next term is this term of gender. And most of us probably have a passing familiarity with gender. But for our purposes tonight, gender is kind of the
Passing
social expression of biological sex, or the cultural association that comes with biological sex.
And those two things are quite different. They can
Yeah.
be extremely different.
And he later, like, I don't know if he's going to do it in this talk, but in the book, he has the chapter where he lays out these definitions, and then he subsequently uses the terms gender and sex completely interchangeably.
Conflates them Yeah. I
Yeah.
was just
I
like,
noticed that
wow.
too when I was listening to the book. I was like, where? I'm like, you just define gender as a social construct and sex as a biological construct. Now you're inflating the two. Or he kept just saying when he meant sex, gender.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And when
exactly
you're
right. He
talking
would
about,
say, "We know what your gender is because you have a penis," or
yeah,
something, and I'm like,
yeah.
Right.
"You
It
And I'm
was
like,
just
no,
defined
that's
that
not
differently a
one.
minute ago."
it felt like somebody else wrote the beginning of the book where he was
Yes.
explaining all this stuff, and then he was just like, okay, did you finish what all the idiots believe? Okay,
Yeah.
now let me write the rest of the book.
Well,
So I was
yeah,
like,
and I
"Dude,
feel
no
like
stuff."
it's his beliefs about gender are completely disconnected from this part where he's clearly, consulting his notes and reading from, something that, like we said, is, probably similar to what might be found in a middle school textbook. And it's like he had to include that in order to say that he's telling you the real definitions of words, but they actually don't match up with his philosophy and his ideology that he gets into later, and he just either doesn't realize that or
Oh, and
doesn't care about
then
that.
he
I don't think he
like
realizes.
later on he starts cherry picking data from like psychologists and psychiatrists and all this type of stuff, and I'm just like,
Okay.
you're
Oh, they
cherry
love that.
picking. That's
Yeah, I
fine.
love when they like to say that psychologists and pediatricians,
And
here's an
scientists are
example of
wrong.
scientists saying that, oh, here's scientific evidence that, trans people aren't real and are disordered. And yet, all of the professional associations that have to do with any of those fields have arrived at the opposite conclusion than this guy. So how is it that he is going to appeal to psychiatry and pediatrics and whatever else as scientific evidence for his case when that is not the consensus in any single one of those fields, not one?
No, and they love to bring up science. Like, they said trust the science with the vaccine, and now they're saying this about trans people and all this. And I'm just like, dude, the science actually does say that trans folks exist and why.
Listen,
And this is settled science, man. You just don't
Not
like
a
that
debate.
particular
friendly.
science.
But the thing is, so why there's so many trans people now is because of COVID and the vaccine. If you didn't if you get the vaccine, you might be trans. It might happen.
I've heard that one.
I
That's a
didn't know
new.
about that.
Yeah,
That's a new
see?
conspiracy for
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Oh.
Like, listen, I
George
can make shit up
Soros.
too.
course.
Like,
Can I get that instead of like if people get banned from getting actual like gender affirming care, can they just go get COVID boosters and that'll like have their
that'll
hormones
fix
and
it.
everything that
Yeah,
they
That'll
need?
do it,
Can we
right?
do that?
Oh, God.
I
That would
guarantee
be nice.
if you scour the internet, I bet there's a conspiracy theory that COVID vaccines cause trans.
No.
I was good. Yeah, I
being
could see that
Oh,
being one
man.
for
I
goddamn
hope
I
not.
guarantee because people are
I
dumb.
guarantee. Yeah, dude.
Probably out there. Oh,
Right.
boy.
So if you
Oh,
have
jeez.
a new mom and a new dad and they send out a birth announcement for their new baby boy, what color is that birth announcement typically
God.
in? Blue.
Pink used
Now
to
ask
be a
yourself,
male
is there
color.
anything intrinsic to the color blue that makes it male?
No.
There's really not. It's just what our culture assigns as a male color.
So you do
What if
okay.
it was
What this
Okay.
means-
So he understands
So
this.
he
Yeah.
does good.
Okay. Very good. Very good, Andrew.
He's like, but that's stupid, and here's why.
Because he
Like,
does
where are
later
we
add
going? Yes, Andrew. This
Yes.
is correct.
and then in the book, he has this whole part where he's talking about, well, look, gender reveal parties are kind of a new trend, but it just goes to show that, people assume that gender means the same thing as sex because why don't they call it a sex reveal party because their baby isn't born yet? And so because people have gender reveal parties, that means that people confuse the terms sex and gender, and so they mean the same thing. And I'm like, I'm sorry,
Nailed it.
we are now basing
And I did that
our
too.
definitions on people who are going on TikTok filming themselves like blowing up their backyard with blue and pink fireworks and setting forests on fire with shit.
Oh yeah,
This is now
yeah.
the person we're consulting to get the nuanced definition of sex and gender. This
Listen.
is the authority on the matter now, really?
Listen, colors tell us who we are, Kara. That's how that goes. Like if I wear pink, I'm suddenly a girl. And if I wear blue, I'm a boy. That's how this works.
That's it.
Okay.
It's the name
And
of the
he
game.
says here that he understands that's not it, and then he
Right.
just
But then he kind of
never comes back to this concept again.
No.
Like we're talking about social identities, like social things that we say, like we've associated, because we've just done that as a culture. And then he admits that it is just something that people did. And they're like, no, like there's other parts of it. It's complicated. I'm like, dude, you are so close. You are so close.
Oh no, he gets it. He gets it, but he doesn't want it to be the case. That's what it is. He gets it completely, but he's just like, but that's not, well, we don't care that that's the way it is.
You have to conform to your genitals, and you have to be in a straight relationship, and you have to make babies. Like that's just the way it is, because God wants it that way, because he's very concerned about those things.
Yeah, and you have to subjugate the other animals. I don't know why he keeps coming back to that in a book that is not
really
about that.
Angry.
But he brings that up a disturbing number of times for my taste.
I was like, give this man a cat.
Is he right? I was like, is he trying to sneak in like the climate change is a hoax in here?
Right.
Like, is that what he's trying? And we're allowed to fuck up the earth, by the way, just so you know. Like
God told us to do that.
Yeah,
we're subjugated.
He did say that, like man has dominion over the earth, which, like, yes, as a conscious creature, an intelligent creature, I get that idea, but nowhere did God say, let's take all the fucking resources that I gave you and destroy it. Like,
I remember a term about,
that's there.
Yeah, I remember something about stewardship of the earth. I remember that part being in there, which we seem to have forgotten about that piece of it and really zeroed in on this subjugate the earth, dominate the animals. And I'm like,
World
okay, y'all, this is getting a little like freaky to me. And why does it always come back to this? I'm sorry, but why does it always come back to that? I can't get past that.
Right.
Oh, okay. We are not gonna make
That's right. We can.
We have to watch for. Okay, I'm gonna make a rule. We have to watch for 2 minutes without saying anything.
Okay.
And we'll take notes.
Hold it in. 2 minutes.
All right, okay, here we go.
Is that gender norms from culture do somewhat vary by culture and vary from culture to culture. So any Braveheart fans in here? One of my favorite movies of all time. You have 13th century Scottishman William Wallace, who wears a kilt. Now, a kilt in 13th century Scotland is associated with masculinity and masculine attire.
Yeah,
but if William Wallace showed up in Bowling Green, Kentucky tonight and was wearing a kilt, what would we associate with a kilt? We would think of that as kind of like more like a
Britney Spears
skirt, something that a woman would wear.
Does he not know what kilts are?
From culture to culture, how gender is expressed does somewhat vary. But what is always pivotal to understand is that gender always follows from biological sex.
No, it doesn't.
But what's happening today is that we are severing gender altogether from the concept of biological sex. And that leads to our next term, and that's gender identity. And gender identity is this understanding that males and females kind of have an internal psychological self-awareness that they feel male or female. Now, it's kind of a contested category because I have no concept of what it would mean to feel like a woman. All I can say is what I feel like as a person with XY chromosomes. And so relating gender identity.
It's like, okay, that's almost like just saying like I have no concept of understanding what it would be like to be black or whatever. So that, you know what I mean? Like, so
yeah, that's usually a sign that you should stop talking about it in a public forum. But
like,
me.
It's
Like,
like you can understand where they're coming from though. Like there's empathy as a thing.
Right.
But I don't know.
like
It's
I
like
don't like, I don't know what it is like to live my life as a man. I don't, as someone that male identifies, like I was assigned female at birth. I live my life as a woman, but I don't, again, do not associate my genitals with how I express myself. It's been socially
Right.
conditioned a little bit because, we're now, that's the environment I grew up in, but I'm comfortable here. I like it here.
Yeah.
But if someone's comfortable in a different place, I don't go there. Well, I can't understand it, so it's bad.
so it's bad.
Just like
Yeah.
if
It's
if
bad.
you're having a different experience, like okay, fine. Like you're still a human being. I'll be nice.
Yeah. It's
So
crazy
dumb.
that they're incapable of that, of just like removing value
Yeah,
judgments
I
on
just so you know, you
concepts.
can know what it's like to live like another person. Just so
You
you
can
know,
ask them.
you can ask. Yeah, you can't like unless you do a
Right.
body swap at Freaky Friday.
Right.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Which
It
wouldn't matter
is
anyway
possible to
because
talk to other people.
also
That's true.
too,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
if we use a Freaky Friday scenario, that just means that you're having a different experience in a different body than the body you were assigned.
Also, like the people who could speak to this issue that he's describing are the very people that he's discounting as not real, because trans people can actually describe the experience,
Yeah.
if not the experience of identifying as a man and as a woman, they can often describe the experience of living life and interacting with the world as one gender and then as another. And yeah, they can describe that being a very different experience in a lot of ways. So yeah, you could find out about that if you asked people, and that is different from identity, but he's telling us that that's not a real thing anyway, so he could certainly learn about the experience of
So like every
being in
trans
the
person
world.
that present like they're passing, because like if they're not passing, people get fucking weird about it. But if they're passing, they're treated like the gender that they are presented as.
Yeah.
So that means that it is a social construct.
Yeah, what
Right.
kills me is when they accidentally like gender them correctly.
Yeah.
And
I
they're like,
love it.
shit, I meant he, and it was like, wow, dude, it's like actually natural for you to just not be an asshole and you
Right.
choose to purposefully go back and and redo it just because you're that much of an asshole.
Yes.
Oh god, it
Oh
makes me
my god. Oh
sick.
yeah, this was something that like does not cease to amuse me when like for like most of my childhood and especially like middle school, high school, a little bit of college, even after that, I was always kind of gender nonconforming, but I didn't really start, understanding about gender until I got out of, fundamentalist, evangelicalism and learned about things in school. And, of course some people will say that, oh well, you got brainwashed. Well, no, I was always this way, and I always did not present as properly female. And for my whole life, people were constantly saying things like, you look like a boy. Are you a man? Are you a boy or a girl? And, constantly, you're not doing femininity right. You're not doing femininity right. You're not doing femininity right. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, hey, by the way, actually, I'm non binary. You know what? The very first thing is that comes out of people's mouth is, oh my god, you will never be anything but a woman. I'm like, where was that my whole rest of my life?
Right, you can't just go against everything you've said up until this point.
Right. Like you've been telling me for my entire life that I'm not a woman, I don't look like a woman, I'm not being feminine,
Well,
I'm doing it wrong. Everything about me is wrong. It's definitely not feminine. I'm not a real woman. And then all of a sudden I'm like, correct. And you're like, I didn't mean any of
I
that. The opposite
no.
of that.
Yeah. In fact, I take it all back and some.
Back. I actually just want to be rude to you no matter what.
Right? Yeah, because I
you
mean, they
must
get to decide what you're allowed to do as far as the boxes that they put people in.
Yes. It's
Uh,
exactly that. This has nothing to do with, I don't like that people have used new pronouns or you're redefining terms. It's exactly what you just said. They want to tell people how they are required to be. And it's not
well,
anything to do with
if
there's
you
a new term or anything. They want to police your gender because he says it in the opening chapter of this book. Your job, if you have a uterus, is to make babies, and your job, if you have a penis, is to put babies in people. Like, that's it. And if you're not doing that correctly, and apparently that biologically means you have to dress and act and talk a certain way too.
What?
I'm not really sure
That's
how we get
another
to
thing
that, but
too. It's like,
which
okay,
you're
changes.
let's
doing it
just
wrong.
say, let's bring down a biological function. Okay, like like you fuck and you make babies. Okay, fine. What does that have to do with gender?
Doesn't.
Yeah,
It
nothing.
can.
Nothing.
It
I
can be an
can,
activity that people find to be
because
very
like in the
fulfilling
animal
for their
kingdom,
gender identity, certainly.
like we
But
Yeah.
don't, like when like in the animal kingdom, we don't sit there and think about all the social constructs of like lions, or just like, oh, they procreate, we don't
yeah,
sit there and think about like the social implication of lion gender. So I'm like, why are we doing it here? I
Right.
don't
right,
understand, because we
right.
understand that
Well,
gender's amorphous even within the animal kingdom
yeah.
and
But I mean,
sexuality. So
but because they're obsessed, like what you're talking about, like with the animal kingdom and stuff, because they're obsessed with like us, basically all like gender and everything, like it's all about like fucking and everything. I swear, I think that a lot of the anger and vitriol and discomfort and stuff gets down to I don't know who I'm supposed to try to fuck, you know. And I think a lot of that goes down to like men, like I don't know who I'm supposed to like try to hit on and stuff. And it's not fair that now I don't know if
or
you know.
well,
Yeah,
well,
that's
because
it.
the
That's it. It's
feminism of
all about trying to have, the privilege of being able to have sex with whoever you want, whenever you want. They have to let you do it. They're required to let you do it. And everybody needs to be going through the world in such a way that makes it easier for, in this case, men to have sex with them. Like, honestly, that seems to be the program here that is being put forth. It really does. It always comes back down to sex. And I
Yeah.
mean, like, the activity of sex.
Right. And it's like and like we were saying before, I always call it disposed. Like conservatives are all about disposed, and everybody's
Mhm.
supposed to do this or do that. And like that's why like with Republicans, they always see like what people are supposed to do. Well, they're supposed to do that, and then that wouldn't happen. If they were supposed to work really hard, and then they wouldn't be poor. Or they're supposed to not have sex, and then they wouldn't need an abortion. And it's all about what they're supposed to. And like Democrats and just like I say Democrats, but just like anybody that's not like that sees the world as it actually is and is trying to go, hey, yeah, okay, but that's not the case all the time. And then what about
Right.
them? Well, they're fucked, they gotta,
Yeah.
just be
They
hurt
better just
because
not go to the bathroom ever in public,
don't go to
you know.
the don't go to the bathroom,
jeez.
don't
Oh
fuck,
man. I feel
don't
really
fuck
bad for you too,
unless you
because
want to
like
make babies, because you can't have a good time.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
like
like you have to be part, like, as since we live in a an economy where both and the cost of living is so high, you like women have to work, but we're not supposed to, because we're supposed to stay home and make babies, even though that requires money and kids are expensive. But you
Mhm.
want it both. I'm like, you can't have it both ways. Either like
Yeah.
you have a system where people are able to stay home and take care of their kids if that is their choice, or B, if you're going to make a system that forces people to work, they're going to work. So and then you have to set up a system so the kids are taken care of. Like you just can't have it both ways. Sorry.
exactly. They
You
set
know,
up a system, yeah, that
yeah,
purposefully pushes women into having to work and then shaming them for doing it.
yes.
Yeah, and then shaming them for having kids. And it's always comes back to, well, you chose to open your legs and now you're in this financial problem. I'm sorry. I thought
Exactly.
you said the whole purpose of my life was to have babies. Now I'm a slut. I
Right.
pick
Listen, well,
one.
it's either you're gonna fucking work or you're gonna stay home and like just nurture the next generation. There's no ambiance. I mean, not ambiance, but there's no.
Nuance. I got it.
I mean,
I mean, there
ambiance
can be
probably
some good
isn't great,
ambiance there. I'm just.
It's gritty and lighting.
Oh, that's hilarious. So, oh my goodness, I
It's
did
just so
not have our
silly.
nameplates up the whole time.
Oh, that's okay. We
Sorry.
know who we are.
I
I
know,
know who
right?
I am.
But well, thank you so much for coming on, and Is there any
We made it
pluggables that
through
we can do?
4 minutes, not like 5 minutes of the video.
Yeah,
I know,
join
right?
us next time for
Yeah.
3 more minutes of that clip.
I
We'll
was
be
gonna
back
say
on
we should come back and
Thursday.
yeah, we should come back and cover that, or maybe somebody else talking about it. Would be
But
cool.
if you want to hear more discussions about these kinds of topics, by all means, check us out at recoveringfromreligion.org. We have talks every Monday. Helen's there most of the time too, and we discuss about all kinds of things like this, as well as many other topics and other things that people might encounter that they have found frustrating or are questioning after being involved in religious faith for a while, or maybe you've heard things that are making you feel bad about yourself, or things that don't make sense to you anymore, or you're looking for community of other people to talk to about that, or whatever the case may be. Check out Recovering from Religion, and there are people there that will talk to you about that, and you can come hang out with the other cool people, because Helen is there, which makes it 20% cooler. I don't
That
know
is
if
the
y'all are aware
rules.
of that, but
Oh,
It is
yeah.
the rules.
yeah.
That's awesome. Well, hey,
It's science.
Yeah.
it's-
Listen, if you can make gender up based on chromosomes, I can make up that you're 20% cooler, but just by knowing me. It's just
That's how it works.
That's
how
right.
it works.
That's
Just
right.
make
we're
sure
gonna be-
that wasn't it.
It defines it.
We're going to be talking about science education next Monday on
Yeah, Ethan Siegel's
RFRX.
going to be on, Brentley. We had him on our
Nice.
podcast.
Yeah.
What is the handle? It's at RFR. Is that what it is? RFR.
Yeah, here, I'll drop the link for you.
Okay.
Hold on. It's recoveringfromreligion.org. Is our main
okay.
website, but you can find the link to our shows directly from the
We're also
website
on
as well.
YouTubes.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah,
No,
we're on
that's
all
perfect.
of the social medias
We
as
are on
well.
socials.
So you can find us that way too.
Sweet. All right. Well, here we usually have this sign off, right? Where I will say who we're gonna say fuck off to, and then we all try to say fuck off together. I don't think I've ever done it with 3 people.
Okay.
So, here's what I say. So, what do we say to the haters, discriminators, and masturbator shamers?
Fuck off. I was off on that one. I got excited.
You were actually the one that we should have followed.